Welcome, Sammi, to the Evolve to Succeed podcast.
Hey Warren, yeah, I'm really excited to be here. It's good to connect with you again after such a long time.
It has. I was thinking the other day, this is the first kind of conversation we've had. Probably the last one we had was probably pre-COVID, but obviously known you for about 10 years. So good for our listeners to get to understand a bit more about your own personal story, journey, that fit, but also we'll cover off during the course of this conversation the passion that you have for physical well-being in the workplace. But I suppose we should start with where you are now in life and in business, as it were. You are co-founder and COO at Fiit. Tell us more about Fiit and how you came to co-found the business, Sammi.
Sure. So Fiit is it's the UK's number one rated fitness solution. You can find us everywhere from Sky TV, we're Vodafone's fitness partner and Samsung's fitness partner and Vitality. So hopefully many people have heard of us. We provide, fitness classes and interactive fitness content where you sort of track your metrics, and you can find everything that can possibly think of, from Pilates and yoga to strength training, cardio classes, treadmill, rowing machines, everything really that you would want to find in a fitness solution. So I hate to probably talk about our competitors, Apple and Peloton, but we are a competitor to Apple and Peloton, and I suppose lots of people might know them. We were voted just in March this year the best streaming service by Men's Health, and actually we've been around since 2017. So we are very much a pre-pandemic fitness solution, and sort of saw the boom of home fitness coming. I think one of the reasons you asked, about founding the business. So it's going to be 6 years next month. It'll be our sixth birthday really soon, which is exciting. But so my previous life is really real estate and DJing and lots of different smaller businesses, in the UK and in Dubai. And in 2016, I left my business in Dubai and met up with a friend from university, Ian, who just exited his technology company. And we were both training in the gym during the day when everyone else was at work, trying to work out what the next thing that we wanted to do was. We were going to fitness classes in London, so boutique fitness. If people know what that is, whether things like Barry's and One Rebel and Soul Cycle, which everyone probably would know. This sort of high energy, great trainer, brilliant experience of a fitness class, quite elitist, quite expensive. And at that time, there was the boom of fitness influencers. So social media was awash with people posting fitness content, and it was exercise moves, but all this copy, written, spelling mistakes. But loads and loads of people were following. People like Joe Wicks at the time, and there was Peloton sort of on the rise in the US, which was an interactive fitness business. So the difference there was there's a gamification element. They're using wearable data or data from the car, the bikes themselves to really gamify the experience, which was really, really great for retention, which is, I suppose, the ultimate goal when it comes to fitness. So we were looking at those things, and really we were trying to work out how can we make an accessible version of the most exciting fitness classes in the world and take it into people's homes. So our original tagline was boutique fitness in your living room, but essentially you throw all those things into the box, influencers, interactivity, boutique studio classes, and out came Fiit. So yeah, that was the idea at the moment. It wasn't this sort of light bulb moment. It was a combination of thinking through different ideas. Our passion was fitness, but we're really passionate about trying to get people moving. Our mission as a business is to make fitness a habit for everybody. The word habit and everybody is really important. It's something for everyone over time, but the habit piece is really it's the name of the game. Fitness is hard. I think 95% of New Year's resolutions are health related, and we all know the classic. By March, 70% of people have given up. So we were trying to create something that motivated you, brought you the best trainers, the best fitness programming, the best music, the best lights, the best gamification, and try and do everything in our power to keep you on that fitness journey. So yeah, that's really the heart of everything that we do.
It's really interesting, isn't it? And it is a great platform, for the listeners that haven't experienced it, go experience it. It's brilliant. I've been using it for a number of years, and I particularly love, for me, the thing that I don't do enough of is stretching and Pilates and those classes that you've got that are, so well recorded, so well delivered, really great trainers, really have made a difference and got me interested in that kind of side of fitness, which is great. But I suppose there's a couple of things there, isn't it? I'm quite interested to kind of explore that, as a startup, two of you that, were looking for your next thing, your competitors, you've already said it are really Apple or Peloton, and they always were, weren't they, in 2017? So did it feel like a bold move to have a startup that you knew had to compete with them, or was it a belief in what you're going to do? Was it the ability to raise funding? What gave you that kind of edge that think we could compete with these businesses?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Well, so interestingly, Apple wasn't in the fitness game in 2017. They launched, I think it was 2019, 2020, but they were, I think they were probably thinking about it then, but there was lots of, I suppose we were trying to compete with, Peloton, Freeletics, lots of US companies at the time, well capitalized businesses. So there was three of us actually. There's Dan, there's three co-founders in the business. That was Ian's business partner in his previous company. And I suppose, I think we've all been on that entrepreneurial journey where we wanted to solve problems. I mean, look, you always know failure is possible, but it isn't really in your mind at that point in time. We were thinking, look, we've got the energy and the drive to try and build something. We can see the problem. And there was, I consult actually for some early stage startups, and there was a guy that I work with now who I met right at the beginning, and I pitched the idea to him. He said to me, look, 95% of founders, they haven't necessarily quite got the conviction, but he said, when you spoke to me, you were so sure about what you were going to deliver that, and he was saying, like, how can I deliver my idea with that sort of conviction? And I don't know what it is really, whether it's a misguided belief. I think you have to think you're going to succeed, with that idea, and you have to just, execute really well. But we spoke to a lot of people early on, got some momentum behind it, and got feedback, I think, from lots of people in the industry. I think at the time, one of the things that surprised a lot of people was that we've got all of the fitness community, this sort of leading trainers and influencers at the time, all together at one point. My role actually at the beginning was recruiting the trainers and building all the production, sort of all the things that you see at the moment. And a lot of them just they liked what we were trying to do. We were trying to bring this really great experience to the masses, and I think they said that we had a good energy about us. They believed that we were going to try and execute. And although you always have a plan of saying, look, we're going to do X, it's always a variation of that plan, but we never backed out of what we said we're going to do. We delivered a version of, what we believe was going to be the end product, and everyone stuck by us for a long, long time. So it was a real energy. I think the other guys down at the end, they've got really good energy about this. And I think that's something that you've got to have, because it can be a challenging process to get something from essentially what is, I mean, I've got on my phone somewhere, Ian's got the writing of a doctor. You can never understand it. And mine's okay, but I've got a picture somewhere of the first sketch of what it would be. And it looks a mess, but you can be pretty proud, 6 years later, that you have this idea on a piece of paper and you've built it into, a really strong brand, and it's exciting.
It's interesting, yeah, and a lot of what you say resonates there with me. And in particular, when we talk about, we help businesses start, scale, and exit, and that startup piece is when we talk to people is making sure they've got the focus, the passion, and the belief in what they're doing. Because, as you say, without it, when you hit that first brick wall, you're just going to flounder, aren't you? And as we all know, and perhaps we'll come on to talk about that in your case in a moment, is that, you know, you do pivot, you do change direction from time to time, you do need to make adjustments, and you can only do that once if you've got that passion and that belief and that focus in what you do. And the other piece around it, I suppose, would be to just talk about, you know, 6 years on, gone through that kind of COVID period. I suppose we have to mention it. One day we won't. But 3 years on from that, it's worth talking about. And you've secured, you know, successfully multiple rounds of funding to continue to develop the product and the business. You know, what have been your greatest challenges, Sammi, so far in that journey? Quite a big question, I know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm laughing because I think there's a lot of challenges along. You know, there has been a lot of challenges. I think one of the things that I think to be a good entrepreneur or to have the stomach for it, you've got to be able to make decisions on a daily basis. I believe building a startup is essentially making decisions on a daily basis, and that can mean you're changing the direction of the business or the company or areas of the business all the time. You know, we started, if you think about it from a content or technology perspective, we launched the business, I think, to the public in April 2018. It was just body weight content. It was sort of, you know, decent technology. We had sort of movement tracking and heart rate tracking, but it was a sort of limited selection, and it was a paid model. And after about 6 months, we pivoted to a freemium model. We thought we could scale by going freemium, and you know, it had its benefits, but we had this hardware piece, the heart rate monitor, that was costing us a lot of money, and it was really draining the cash flow. It was sort of an impact. So then we pivoted to free trial, and we started adding different layers of content. We started looking to the future. We were always wanting to be a hybrid business way before hybrid was really a thing. So we looked at gym partnerships in 2019 to try and be where everyone is doing fitness. So not just at home, it was in the gym as well. And we tried to ride the wave of different parts of the market. So, you know, functional fitness and that CrossFit community. We added in connected, you know, equipment with the assault bike and the treadmills, and we're really trying to find our space in the fitness ecosystem, because actually when you really get into it, people want lots and lots of different types of content, and they want things on their own terms. So there's been a real shift during that 6 years. I mean, you have to talk about COVID, right? Because before COVID, we were sort of driving the market in the UK. There were competitors, but no one really thought about a digital strategy. You know, so most apps, what we call Fitness App 1.0, they were just this sort of someone in a room, some basic functionality, and the retention rates on those apps are really, really low. We were driving really good retention with this sort of interactivity piece, but no, there wasn't that many competitors. And then COVID hit, and then all of a sudden, overnight, everyone's like, okay, we need to do this. You know, I remember about a week in, I think it might have been Mark Wahlberg from F45, you know, on the phone to one of our business partners asking about white labeling the products, and all the gyms were calling us. And you have to make these decisions we had all these big businesses coming to us and saying that we want to use your technology. And we had to take a call at that moment in time and said, do we want to do that or do we not? Do we want to start white labeling? And we didn't. We wanted to
you want to grow your own brand. I mean, that's a big leap of confidence and faith in yourselves, isn't it? That's really backing yourselves, because that's the easy point maybe to start to cash in and make some short-term revenue to the detriment of the long-term strategy. So, I mean, there must have been some debate around that and those discussions, or was there just that inner confidence, Sammi?
It's not about confidence. It's actually about decision making. I think you have to weigh everything up. You know, we operated on like what we call a strategic decision group model, where we had a strategic decision group of senior decision makers, and we had to sweat a lot of these decisions. You know, you'd have the finance teams involved, you'd have the the marketing teams, you'd have, CEO and C-suite. Essentially, you have to sweat the decision. You have to weigh up the pros and cons. And to be honest, we've definitely not made the right decision every single time, but we had to have the confidence that we're going to go down a particular path. We spent a lot of time looking to explore the US. I went out and recruited some of the best US trainers. We started to try and build partnerships with US companies to grow in the US, because to grow in the US you need millions and millions and millions of dollars, which we didn't have. But if you can get the right US partners, you can scale through their marketing dollars. So we explored the US, and we developed some really deep partnerships, and some of those things played out really well, and some of them didn't play out that well as well. And it's this constant. It's not a confidence. It's trying to weigh up what's the best path for the business, whilst knowing that you're a startup, managing your cash flow, and then also looking at the market. The market makes a lot of the decisions for you. And, right now, although everyone knows what at-home fitness is, and hybrid fitness and functional fitness, the economic climate has meant that the average number of subscriptions that people have, I think it's fallen from around 4.5 to around 2.1 subscriptions per person. So people's overall wallet and spend is lower, and you've got to do different things. You almost got to do more things to keep that customer. So I think where we are now is we're in the middle of that ecosystem. So we're looking at driving, people in the gym. We're looking at being in the center of the ecosystem with hardware partners, rowing machine companies, treadmill companies, and at home. But I think one of the pieces that has always been part of the strategy is our partnerships. And because essentially, partnerships with big companies like Vodafone or Samsung or Sky, where we're using their marketing spend to help drive our subscriptions. And I think that's probably been one of the best plays that we've had, was because we had a great brand and we had great content and good technology. I think those are the three things that we can say that we have. We've been able to do really good deals with some of the biggest brands in the world, and that's really helped us when the sort of the B2C spend has significantly reduced.
That's helping you find your market, isn't it? There's so much interesting things in what you said. I love that thought process. Particularly in a business with three founders, usually the decision making strategically they keep. I love the idea of having that strategic decision making team. I'm really intrigued to see, because over those years, therefore, you've pivoted a few times. How have you managed that? Because again, I think this is where some startups and ambitious startups feel is they need to pivot, but they don't necessarily manage that change process well. How have you managed that change process with the team internally? Is it just strong communication, or have you implemented certain kind of procedures and systems, and how have you approached that with the team?
I just dial it back a little bit on the decision making. I think, to be honest, in the first couple of years, we probably didn't have the right decision making process in place. And actually, when I talk to startups now and I talk to founders, and some of them, they've just raised money. There's 3 founders, there's 4 founders, and it's really exciting. And one of the things that I say to them is, do you individually know what you want to get out of this business? Do you individually or collectively know who is responsible for decisions within these particular areas? So whether it's a marketing decision, a finance decision. And I think for the first couple of years, we all felt we had the same weight, and there was probably too many cooks, actually, and we potentially hindered certain decision making, I would say. Yeah, I think we probably hindered decision making. But then we went through a process with an external coach, and we actually looked at psychometric testing. We looked at strengths and weaknesses within the founding team, and we came to a much, much better understanding of decision making and how we we need to run that decision-making framework. And yeah, and then we basically gave ownership to each other to help make decisions. And we grew that strategic decision-making group to have much more diversity within that team, because it was too founder-driven and probably not enough people. So we need to expand that group. And I think once that group was put into place, we implemented what probably most companies will have, which is the user, OKRs, their quarterly key results. And we moved into sort of small teams that would execute those things. So it wasn't, everyone and too many cooks. It was like, right, here's a team that's going to deliver the gym propositions. Who do we need? Okay, there's these 6 people, and then they're really responsible for that. They report back to the senior team. They report back to the business, and we see how they're going. But I think the decision-making framework is really where a lot of companies could benefit from, where they think through that process much, much earlier on and try and remove egos in terms of who should be making the decision. And yeah, I think one of the big things is that a majority, you should go with the majority, right? A majority can be 6 out of 10. But if the other 4 people, it doesn't need to be 10 out of 10. It should just be the 6. And maybe the lead decision maker, whether it's the CEO, whether it's the CMO, whether it's the CFO or whatever, or whichever heads you have in that business, make the final decision because it's their area of expertise. The other 4 that maybe haven't backed the decision, they have to get on board and back it, because
absolutely,
that's what slows things down. That's what creates problems. Is that if you make a decision and you have a majority and you have someone who's leading the decision making, the overall decision, the people that maybe it didn't quite go their way, they need to go, okay, we've made that decision and we're going to back it. We're not going to slow it down, because I think that can happen very, very often.
Yeah, I suppose politics get in the way, but as you mentioned it yourself, I really agree with that piece that ego, gets in the way too often when a business is going through that transition from startup to scale up kind of phase. And what I've really enjoyed about this conversation so far, Sammi, is that thought process that actually, as you enter that scale up phase, proper decision making process, and having that efficient and everybody bought into it, and knowing how you make decisions will make a big difference. And I suppose one final question before we sort of come on and talk about physical well-being in the workplace and some other subjects. Yeah. I'm really interested, and perhaps, from your experience at Fiit, but also as you've alluded to helping other kind of startups, is you have succeeded in fundraising, which again is another brick wall that a lot of ambitious startups kind of falter at. Now, what would your advice be to anybody listening to this podcast that is looking to secure funding? What are the tips that you would give them, Sammi?
I think you need clarity of vision. You need clarity of your proposition, and you need to ask for help, because, I've worked recently with some very technical teams who are incredible at building the technology, but their articulation, for example, maybe of the problem, the persona that they're trying to acquire, or even the presentation, the branding and the presentation of what they're putting forward, doesn't match their technical skills. And I think, you really have to articulate your competitive advantage, the size of the market, and, more so than ever, I think the more traction that you can prove, the better. Whether that is customer conversations, whether that is, you can touch and feel the product. When even if I think back to raising money with Fiit, and the fundraising environment back then was probably more favorable, but even then, our seed round, I reckon we had 50 meetings. And I say it's like a partner. You only need to find one, but it might take a long time to find that person. So, we were lucky enough that we had a bit of, we invested some of our own money to build the product. We went to an agency and built that product. But So we had investors actually testing the product. We filmed a class in a cafe with one trainer, and the background was, you know, the white roll boards. I think I should know the name of those, but I've forgotten. And you know, 100% it crashed during the class that we broadcast, but
Yeah.
the investors used the product. The gamification piece was the reason why they wanted to come back. They said, "Oh, I can see why this is going to be beneficial," and they invested off the back of that. I think you can't just have an idea anymore. You can't just have a piece of paper and a strong team.
Yeah. Those
You have
days
to
are long
really
gone, aren't they? Yeah.
yeah. You know, I saw there's a company that I know that's just closed out their seed funding, and you know, it looks brilliant. They've got an amazing team. They've got clients. They have a brilliant brand. They've got a fantastic website. They have been at loads of events. People know them, and they've essentially built momentum into their business to go out and raise that money. And I think that's what you have to do. You have to showcase that here's the product that we're going to be giving to customers. This is what the customers have said, you know, and really go out and make it look beautiful. You know, we like things that look good. Like if you've got a presentation deck that doesn't look sexy and it's not, the copywriting's not fantastic, then investors might go, well, is that how they're going to operate in their day-to-day business? Are they going to present things really well? Are they going to focus on the attention to detail? So I think you just have to be really thorough.
Brilliant. Some great tips there. So do want to come on and talk to you. And I suppose it's no surprise doing what you do and having been in the fitness industry for 6 years is, you know, one of your key passions, you know, see it in the content that you put out personally, Sammi, is getting businesses to understand that importance of physical activity for well-being in the workplace. So I suppose we should start with a very simple question of what do you really mean? What does that expressly mean? And what does good look like for businesses that take this subject seriously?
Sure. Yeah, you're right. You know, I'm really passionate about well-being. I think individual well-being is really the most important thing. You know, without our health, we don't really have anything. I think they say that a healthy person has 1,000 thoughts and an unhealthy person has one thought. They just want to be healthy. So physical well-being, mental well-being, emotional well-being, financial well-being, there are many aspects to overall well-being, you know, even environmental well-being, you know, the place that you're in. I think, you know, for this conversation, we're focusing on the workplace, but really it's really for life and for work. You know, from my perspective, you know, you can't have high performance without well-being. It's not sustainable. And I think that businesses need to take it way, way more serious. It's not a nice to have, it's not a benefit. It's something that is really going to underpin their actual business itself. You know, the engagement of their staff, the unmanaged attrition, the productivity, which I know people probably don't really like that word productivity, but essentially, you know, if you're being paid to do a job, you have to output, right, for that company. You have to produce
Kind of
work.
economics, I suppose, isn't it, Sammi? Yeah.
Yeah, so it covers lots of things. So, you know, mental, physical, financial, emotional, environmental, diversity, equity, and inclusion, all of those things are around how somebody feels at work, but really it extends to the home as well. And I think that there's some really powerful stats. You know, my passion is the physical side because actually I think it's the thing that can impact the majority of areas. I think well-being is often seen as more of a cure. So, you know, companies do loads of things for mental health, but they deal with it when, you know, if people need therapy or counseling. They need it when people are, or from a health perspective, they provide health insurance, you know, medical insurance. They provide things for when you're sick versus trying to actually go, well, how do we make our staff really well? How do we actually give them the most energy possible in their working life? I think companies actually have the biggest opportunity to impact the health of the nation because we all go to work. You know, we spend about 40% of our lives at work. So, some of the stats that I think might be surprising, most people might know them, but there's some WHO stats from the end of last year around inactivity, and they say that between 2020 and 2030, there's going to be 500 million non-communicable diseases, which are diseases that are not transmitted. They're preventable. Okay, and about, I think it's 47% or 45% is going to be hypertension, so that's high blood pressure, and 43% is from depression. That's all caused by inactivity. So, and 70% of all healthcare expenditure is going to be due to inactivity. So, you've got depression in there, which is a serious mental health problem that needs to be tackled, but it's caused by inactivity. And I think, my big passion is to get businesses, employers, employees to put physical activity really at the heart of their personal and professional culture, because the knock-on impacts are huge.
And you're very much talking across the board in terms of all subjects, well-being, to be proactive rather than reactive. And I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think those that do it well are proactive, and the reactive state is just kind of a sanitary thing now, and most businesses offer it, don't they? But it's probably easier for an organization, isn't it, to think about how do they look after the mental well-being of their teams on a proactive kind of basis. I mean, how do they go about doing it from a physical activity basis, Sammi?
So, look, I think first and foremost that companies need to recognize the impact that well-being can have on their teams. Instead of us sort of focusing on physical and mental. And I think I speak to lots of CEOs, lots of HR directors, and on the HR side, most of them are saying that actually leadership is saying, the budget's not there, the market's challenging environment, and it's we've got low engagement and people aren't well and they're sick, and it's like, well, if you invest in their well-being, it's going to have this sort of knock-on effect. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges at the moment, is recognizing the importance of their employees' well-being, and if they look after them, those knock-on effects are going to come back. They're going to have higher engagement, you're going to have less sick days, they're going to be more profitable, there's going to be less unmanaged attrition. There's so many, you're going to have better mood. Physical activity boosts your mood, right? You have better relationships with your colleagues. So I think it's around this idea around how do they go about it. There's a few things. They need to facilitate a working model. So it needs to be embedded into their culture to say that you can exercise, you can move during your working day. It doesn't need to be after work or at the weekends. They need to provide time, to provide flexibility, they need to provide resources. And I think number one, they need to lead by example, because it comes from the top. Fiit supports lots and lots of companies' corporate well-being. So we have, it's called Fit for Work. We provide a digital solution, but we also provide a lot of engagement surrounding that. And chatting to some of the senior leaders in those businesses, they've really had their sort of eyes opened. Some of them have Fiit users come in and referred it into their company. There's one company in particular that the CEO wasn't really that active, and now he does Fiit sort of 4 or 5 times a week, and it's really embedded into his culture. And I suppose he was being shown the path by a member of staff, but now they facilitate time, they facilitate resource, they have educational workshops, they have conversations, and I think you can't just have this summer of well-being sort of conversation. Lots of companies do something once a year, or
well-being week or well-being
talk.
day, or like just kind of fad kind of approach. Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? And I look back on what we did during COVID for our team. We gave them all, or I said, look, if you want to, you're stuck in the house, you're working. If you want some physical activity, we paid for any of them to have a Fiit subscription. But I now look back, as soon as COVID ended and we got them back, and they were hybrid working, all of that, we've kind of dropped it. And I'm looking
Yeah.
at myself and I'm thinking, even during this conversation, Sammy, I'm nearly slapping myself around the face and going, well, it was important then. Why isn't it now? But it's that,
Yeah.
yeah, consistency, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the engagement piece. We've said it before. Fitness is hard. The world is challenging. It's not set up to make it easy for people. I really, you know, people have busy lives. They have busy schedules. Childcare is a problem for families. It's not easy, and also everything. Whether it's from Netflix to food delivery to I mean, look, so many things make it difficult for us to move and work from home, right? With people losing their commutes.
Yeah,
So you have to basically take a really proactive approach to it. It needs to be regular, it needs to be consistent. People will absolutely give up, they will churn, but you have to reinvigorate them. We get lots of reactivations on Fit where you have people who are customers, they work out for a period of time, they go dormant, and then they start again. And it's this motivation piece. And that's why, when it comes to well-being strategy, is you need to do something regular. So, every quarter, whether it's a company challenge, every quarter a workshop, or even once a month. You can have a speaker for once a month for
mm,
lunch and learn, right? For not that much money for big organizations. So, but it's good. Some organizations now have well-being teams and they are taking it seriously. But I think, all I can say to, any employer or business leader is that you have to build it into your business strategy because you will keep people for longer. You'll have a better culture and you're just going to feel more energized. Like you want people to, like if you set out your company values and as a leader, you want them to show up every day. You want them to be on time. You want them to be energized. Anyone who's got children will know that they do what you do and not what you say. I've got 3 children and they will follow your lead. And that I think is very much the same when it comes to a business leader is that, look, don't just tell people here's a benefit, here's a Fit subscription, here's a budget. You've got to get stuck in yourself. You've got to show them that actually they can work out at lunchtime or they can do a run club at 9 in the morning when people have dropped kids off from school because otherwise it's not suitable before work. And you are giving them budget to have workshops, and then people will really appreciate it, and they will see the benefit that that you really value their how they feel and their well-being.
brilliant. Yeah, and people will actually start to believe, and I suppose that's when action happens, that it's not a fad and you're not just paying lip service to it. You believe in it and you follow
Yeah,
through on it. And you come back to that word I suppose I used just now in terms of being consistent. So that's great. And we should probably just reflect on your own journey. I mean, from what have you
sure.
learned about your own personal well-being, Sammy? 6 years of Fit and obviously a successful property career
Yeah,
before that. But the 6 years of Fit have clearly been quite an emotional journey, I'd expect, and quite a roller coaster in itself. But what have you learned about your own personal well-being, and what sort of things are in your own personal regime that others could perhaps take some hints and tips from?
sure. I think the last 6 years have definitely been challenging. I've got 3 children. So I've been through a divorce. I've got 3 children. I'm running a startup. There's daily decisions, pivots. We had the pandemic, lots and lots of things. My whole life has really been constant changes. Trying new things, successes and failures in different countries, and I would say more than ever, in the last 6 years, the one thing that has enabled me to be consistent, to show up, to have the energy to do the day to day is being physically active, is improving the amount I sleep. I didn't used to sleep as much. My wife has definitely, she said, look, you need to live for a long time, so you need to sleep more, you need to eat well, and they sound like basic things, but one of the most powerful things that anyone can do is sleep. Anyone with young children will know they have to go through that period where you don't really sleep, and you know how much of an impact that has on your mood. So then if you think you're not sleeping well enough, you're coming into the office, you're not going to be that balanced in meetings. You're not going to be the make the best decisions. I think I'm pretty poor at remembering quotes, and I haven't written these things down, but I read this. I think it was Ariana Huffington talks about Bill Clinton, that he says that every bad decision I made was when I was too tired. He talks about not sleeping enough. So I think for me, physical activity is absolutely at the heart of everything that I do. I try and move almost every day. Both me and my wife, we do Pilates in the morning. We're training for the London Marathon, which is great, but having something in the diary, having a goal, it doesn't have to be a marathon. I don't do a lot of marathons, but having something in the diary, having something booked, even if it's a challenge, for example, on Fiit, or an exercise challenge that lasts a month, having something you can do with someone else is important. And finding times, walking, for example, I'm such an advocate of walk and talk. I think it was a huge, I'm doing some wellbeing tips for a non-profit tomorrow. And actually, I'm just going to talk about walking because it was such a big thing in the pandemic. But people forget, they're sat working from home, and I track my steps often over a whole week. And, I try and get 15,000 plus a day and get up. And sometimes I look at my watch at 2:00 and I've done 2,000 steps. So you have to, 10-minute walk is 1,000, 20-minute walk is 2,000. Shifting to walk and talk and, having phone call meetings is that's a really integral part of my week. Look, I'm talking at pace.
Yeah, no, some brilliant hints and tips. But, I think you've teed up nicely because we're looking to get a sleep expert on the podcast to talk about the power of sleep, Sammi. So definitely advocate that. And, just that, the power of accountability as well, I think is true, isn't it? When you're trying to improve your own well-being, fitness, whatever element it may be, telling somebody what you're doing and making sure you're being held to account. And the idea of challenges are great. And, the walk and talk. So some great tips and ideas and thoughts there, Sammi. I really appreciate that. So I suppose as we start to wrap up the conversation, would kind of like to ask the question, what next for Sammi? What next for Fiit? What's coming on the horizon? What excites you about, the time period ahead?
Sure. Yeah, I think, look, what's next for Fiit is that we are continuing to drive to be in the middle of that ecosystem. So working with lots of new brands. We've got some great partners in the corporate side who are pushing, heavily into the corporate well-being space, working with big brands. We actually, I look after the Accenture UK, they're a huge workforce in the UK. Lots of big partnerships, and really just at the heart of that hybrid ecosystem. So you can train at home, you can train at the gym, you can train, on the go. So continuing to build great content, great technology, and to really create the best partnerships that we can. On a personal perspective, it's continuing to just work more and more in the well-being sector. So, I support startups, early stage startups, really those focused on anything that's going to improve human health. That's the sort of the area of passion. And then, well-being workshops and talks for big companies, really just trying to, get that message home, because education is really, really sort of a key element. So definitely some new things coming in the pipeline in that area.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sammi. And always wrap up with this question is, what's your definition of personal success, Sammi?
So, I need to think off the cuff here, right? I would say, I think it's two things: living to your own values and having control of your time. I think those two things are really, really, I think, important. I've met a lot of successful people. Actually, even this weekend, I was at a wellness retreat, and some very successful people there who they hadn't really had a break for 25 years. They hadn't taken their kids to school. For me, I take the kids to school, I pick them up, I can take them to clubs. And I think having that control of your time is important. The success here isn't really related to the actual business. It's really personally how you want to live your life. So I think, living to your values and having control of your time, for me, is whatever you do, I think that's my definition of success.
Brilliant. I love it, Sammi. Really, really love that. And if people want to know more about Fiit, they want to know more about you, where can they go?
Sure. So, Fiit is, we're on Instagram. It's double IT. So fit.tv on the web, or Fit IIT on Instagram. You can find loads of information there. You can find me on LinkedIn. So I'm Sammi. It's SAMMI Adhami. I'm sure my name is going to be in there on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. And yeah, sure, you can, email me if you want to talk well-being, if you want to talk, fit, if you want to talk, workplace culture, then I would love to chat all day long about it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sammi. It's a shame I could chat all day long to you too, but time to bring the podcast to a conclusion. Thank you for a really thought-provoking conversation. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I've made some notes as we've got along myself for things that I'm going to do as a result,
Great.
and I hope our listeners do. Thank you for being a great guest.
Yeah, thanks, Warren. Appreciate it.